friends. It's time for another installment of Lake of Dragons Lockdown Edition. Been reading To Kill the Dragon, being the first part of Lake of Dragons. We're on chapter 3 right now. Changed scenery again a little bit. Figured I'd go to the bar. Obviously, not a bar where there are people, other humans or anything. A little different scenery. Disclaimer before we start this, there's a song halfway through the chapter that Malik sings to the trees. I had never intended to sing that out loud. Figured it would always exist in people's heads, so I'll do the best I can. Bear with me. Chapter 3, The Sobbing Forest. When Malik woke, the sun was just peeking over the horizon. Perrin was already awake. She sat on her cot with her knees pulled tight to her chest and her arms wrapped around them. Long golden dirt-streaked hair hung about her face in clumps. She looked as if she were staring at the wall, but Malik knew she was staring far past it. She rocked back and forth, mumbling. He couldn't understand what she was saying. She appeared to be in some sort of trance. He went to her and sat beside her, placing his arm around her shoulders. "Are you all right, lassie?" he asked in as gentle a tone as he could muster. She didn't answer. Her weight slumped against him. She buried her face in his chest and wept. He didn't say another word. He just held her, stroking her hair and rubbing her back. He really had no idea how to handle this type of situation. He remembered how it felt at the loss of Gildra, the emptiness and the rage. Compassion for Perrin filled him as he squeezed her just a bit tighter. He decided he would hold her until the tears were done. Perrin wept for most of the morning. By the time she was finished, Malik's shirt was good and wet and her cheeks were streaked with clean spots that rivers of tears had eroded in the dirt there. She sat up and looked him in the eyes as she wiped her own. Her expression reflected how terrified and alone she felt. Questions floated behind her pretty blue eyes that had become red and swollen from her tears. She looked as if she'd been beaten by a strong man who knew nothing of mercy. What would happen to her now that she had no mother? Where would she go when Malik's journey was finished? Would she be alone? He could see her little mind was starting to focus on the present and beginning to process the depth of her situation. Perrin, he began, before she asked the questions he knew she had. "I won't be leaving you alone. I'll be watching over you as if you were my own. I won't be letting anything happen to you." "How could I be your own?" she asked. You're not old enough to be me papa. Who will be taking care of you?" He had no proof for her that he could take care of her. He knew he could keep her safe, alive, and fed, but he really had no idea how to raise a child. True, he was well trained for a battle and survival in the wild, but what did he know about little girls? He decided to fake it as best he could. "That'd be true. I'd still be a lad myself. But have you ever had a brother?" he asked, quizzically, raising one eyebrow. "No," she shook her head. "Fine," he said, raising his hands as if to say, voila. "I'd be your brother then. And if we don't be finding a nice couple who want to be raising a beautiful little lass like yourself, you can stay with me. Ever your path leads? Ever my path leads. You'll never be alone, Perrin, I promise you that." He knew she was completely dependent on him. The truth was, he really needed her too. He felt invigorated, like he had a purpose. When he had merely been looking out for himself, he felt scared, alone. He hadn't a goal. Now he had to keep this little lass alive and deliver her to a place where she could live and grow. That alone was reason enough to go on. He was ready to attack the road, conquer the sobbing forest, and finish his journey, wherever his path led him. By the time he had convinced her that everything would be as all right as it could be given their current circumstances, the sun was already high in the sky. They had lost most of the morning. In fact, the hour was close for the midday feast. However, Malik didn't want to lose any more light. He gave Perrin some flatbread and kept some for himself. She wrinkled her nose up. They had missed the morning feeding and she was quite hungry. Even still, she didn't fuss. Deep down, she wanted to get away from the emptiness the place now held. There wasn't anything left for her there. Her path followed Malik's, and she would follow where he led. Malik strapped Perrin onto a good solid horse. She told him the horse's name was Grinner because he always looked like he was smiling. He had belonged to Master Kelshow from down the road. She told Malik that her papa had told her to stay away from old man Kelshow because he was a kook. She thought he was funny, though. He was always nice to her, and he always let her play with Grinner. That was great news for Malik because she felt completely comfortable riding the horse. He tied a rope from Grinner's saddle to Validus' saddle, and they were off. John took the lead. They crossed the river on a bridge Perrin said her grandpapa had helped build long before she was born. Once they reached the other side, Malik stopped them. He told Perrin to say goodbye to her old home, as she would maybe never make it back this way again. She turned and looked back at her village. She offered one last tear as her goodbye. The sobbing forest was about 100 yards from the riverbank, and the path they would take went straight toward it from the bridge. It did have an ominous look about it. Milo couldn't be certain that it would have the same ominous look if Perrin not warned him about it. Still, the thought of going east and taking the well-traveled, safe road that led along the river and around the sobbing forest did cross his mind. However, Imatatha taught him, the straight path always be the best path, he would say. That be why we train, lad. There be no one or no thing that'll be giving us cause to stray from the path we choose. Let any man or any form of beast try denying me destiny, and let them taste the full range of me fury. Imatatha's might and fury would be well welcomed by Milo just then. Alas, this journey was his and Perrin's and even Jom's. Into the sobbing forest and a thick tangle of trees they went. Even with the sun at its highest point, the path was dark and gloomy. It was scarcely traveled by the looks of things. The trees seemed to crowd in around them. Jom even seemed to sense there was something overbearing about these trees. The forest was dense. Just a few feet in, and it looked to be more about twilight than midday. The trees whispered. They weren't moaning or sobbing or anything of the sort. It seemed as if they were quietly disgusting their new intruders as they closed in tighter and tighter on the weary travelers who had ventured into their domicile. Malik began thinking way too much. Imatatha had always assured him fear was his biggest enemy. There was nothing Malik could not defeat. No one that could find him unless he allowed himself to be found. He quieted his mind, lifted his head, and with a strong voice said, "Jom, up!" With that command, Jom quickened his pace. The trees continued to scrutinize the travelers and whisper back and forth about them, but they also seemed to back off a bit. It even appeared as if there was a hint of sunshine slipping between the leaves and branches and making its way down to the path. Perhaps the trees had decided the little caravan was no threat. Or perhaps they had been expecting them. Imatatha had always hinted about Malik's great purpose. Perhaps the trees recognized him. Whatever the case may have been, the way was definitely getting easier. And that was just fine with Malik. The group continued to travel in silence and, all things considered, made relatively good time. Meanwhile, someone else had become quite interested in Malik's journey. It was someone unknown to him, someone elsewhere, in a place far to the east of where he now traveled, even farther than where the maps don't go. Yes, even farther still than the Lost Wood. Someone watched. Caldeman watched Malik and his small crew as they made their way through the sobbing forest. What the trees saw, he saw, and what they spoke to him. He sat upon his throne in a trance-like state as he listened and watched with his mind. He had great power and a great knowledge of Malik's purpose. He also had a great stake in the lad's journey. After a time, he let the vision pass and told the trees to keep watch over Malik. He needed him alive. Much of their world would be affected by Malik, including Caldeman. This fact boded well for Malik. As long as Caldeman found him to be useful, he would find clear paths to travel for much of his journey. "Malik has made it to the sobbing forest," Caldeman boomed. "Excellent! Order the trees to strike him down and save the last dragon," Moshat replied with gritted teeth and clenched fists. "Don't be foolish, Moshat," Caldeman said as he shook his head and waved the idea off. "Malik's fate must play out. His journey is just beginning, and he has much to do before he can be judged. Would you have him cut down before his choice is clear? The effects on our world can be cataclysmic. Surely you must understand that, Moshat. At this moment, there is nothing more important to the balance of our world than this lad. The prophecy must play out." "But Caldeman," Moshat continued, "the prophecy he seeks to fulfill will bring ruin upon our world. You know this. The war is not over." "Moshat, it is not our place to cut him down, not now. We must at least give him the chance to choose his path," Caldeman replied, almost pleadingly. "What if he chooses wrong? Then what for our world, Caldeman?" Moshat pressed on. "Queptis have set this play into motion. We must have faith in them. Without Malik, we have no chance. While he still breathes, there is hope. Trust me, my brother, please." He emphasized this last point by taking Moshat's hand and looking him in the eye. "Please." "Fine," Moshat replied. "For now, we do it your way. For now." Back in the forest, the trees made a grand path in obedience to Caldeman's order. It certainly seemed the way through the sobbing forest would be much easier than Perrin had described. The group continued to trot along as the whispers of the trees became fainter and fainter. Perhaps they were dying down, or perhaps Malik was growing accustomed to them. Either way, he feared their intent less and less as they traveled. The group was making much better progress than Malik expected they would. By the time the sun was getting low enough that he wanted to stop for the night, they were well into the forest. He found a good spot to make camp and, by some strange twist, found that a small pile of perfect burning wood had been left right in the same spot. The wood was good and dry and needed no cutting. Perhaps I'd be finding favor with the trees, he thought. He dismounted Validus and made camp. Jom stretched out by the fire as Malik and Perrin shared a bit of chatter while they fed. They ate quite well. Imatata taught Malik that being prepared was always more important than the speed in which you arrived. Be doing you no good to arrive dead for lack of supplies, lad, Imatata always said. Malik paid heed to this warning, and his group had just what they needed to make it through. He made sure to point this fact out to Perrin, as he felt like he was her mentor now. She looked to him for guidance, and he intended to do his best to prepare her for the great journey of life. Sleep didn't come easy for either Malik or Perrin that night. They both had demons terrorizing their dreams. The trees offered some comfort. They seemed to crowd in a little tighter as the night grew darker. It was almost as if they were protecting Malik and Perrin. Even Jam, Validus, and Grinner felt completely safe from anything that might be creeping around in the shadows. Malik noticed the trees were moaning, though, just as Perrin had said they would. Not the ones closest to them. Those kind of hummed, almost like a lullaby. The song actually did help ease their minds a bit. The trees farther off were moaning, or sobbing. It was hard to tell, but it only kept Malik's attention for the briefest of moments. He had other thoughts to process. They would find sleep easier in the nights to come, but their dreams would still be filled with horrible, bloody images and lost, lonely feelings. The days danced by quickly in the forest. The group continued to make good time, and after 5 days was roughly 3/4 of the way through. Malik's estimations were a little less, but he was very close. The trees continued to offer comfort to the group, so Malik offered them a song as they rode. It was more of a chant, really. He sung to the tune of a battle song Imatata had taught him. At the time, he had said that he and his men had sung this song whenever they went to battle. Now the tune was the same for Malik and the trees, but the words were different. He sang, "Oh, the trees stand mighty and tall by day, and they knock ye down and they block your way. Be there darkness in your heart, but when ye come in peace and hear their cries, they make way and they will spare your lives. Be there goodness in your heart. Oh, the trees, they cry and cry by night. They shed tears for those who are without light, lose their lives in the forest deep. But they sing to ye sweet lullabies. If you see with your heart and not your eyes, keep you safe in the forest deep." He sang the tune over a few times. The trees seemed greatly pleased he was honoring them. They sang back to him, and Perrin joined in. Jam even howled a few notes here and there. For the briefest of moments, they were having fun. Refreshed their spirits and put a sprint in Jam's step. They charged along as they sang amongst the trees, who answered back with hymns of their own. They danced a sway, making music with the rustling of their leaves and the whistling of their branches. Malik was so swept up in the moment, as were the trees, Perrin and Jam, he never noticed the hooded man stepped out onto the path. By the time he did, Jam was but 50 feet from the dark figure. The scrod noticed the man just after Malik. Malik called him to heel as he pulled back on Validus's reins. Malik wasted no time. He could sense from the trees that this man was dangerous and meant to do his group harm. The trees, for their part, seemed upset they hadn't noticed the dark figure before he stepped out onto the path. They had been so caught up in Malik's song they had let their guard down. Nervousness drifted from branch to branch and leaf to leaf. Fire rushed through Malik's veins. He was unafraid. There was nothing that would get by him to harm Perrin. Nothing. Jam stood his ground, growling as Malik sized the man up. His face was covered in shadow from the hood which hung down just past his eyes. He was large in stature, and his cloak covered his entire body. The cloak itself was brown and dirty. The man had his arms folded behind his back. "He won't fare so well against me sword from that stance," Malik thought as he drew his weapon. "Make way," he ordered the man, surprising himself with the deep authority his voice carried. Perrin even winced a little. The man didn't respond. Instead, he began to advance toward the group. As he did, he brought his hands up to his face and removed his hood, exposing a wild mop of orange hair and a menacing grin buried under a nappy snarl that served as his beard. His eyes were what caught Malik's attention, though. They had no color at all. They were like two hunks of coal, black and dead. "Make way or taste the full fury of me sword," Malik demanded once again, yet the man, or whatever he was, still advanced. Malik leapt from Validus's back. Before his feet hit the forest floor, however, he was caught up by a branch and pulled up to the safety of the loftiest point of a tree. At the same time, Perrin, Jam, Validus, and Grinner were all scooped up in the same fashion. This threw their would-be attacker into a mad fit of rage. He stomped about wildly as he cursed the trees. Then 2 more men clad in the same fashion ran out from behind the trees and began stomping about in the same manner. They cursed Malik. They cursed the trees. They said nasty things to Perrin that Malik wasn't sure he even understood. He burned inside, though. He fought against the tree's grip to free himself. He desperately wished to dispatch these wicked, heartless men who would do Perrin harm. Jam fought to free himself with the same vigor, but to no avail. As the two helpless heroes watched, however, the trees exacted their own vengeance. A vine whipped out from behind a tree and wrapped itself around the first cloaked man's neck. It quickly tightened as his face turned first pink, then red, then purple. A silent scream twisted up the features of his face, but no sound came out. The trees growled in unison as the man's black eyes bulged from their sockets. They burst in a thick spray of blood just before his head popped. Perrin closed her eyes and hid her face, but Mylek watched. He watched as heavy branches sprung from far above their heads and crushed the other two cloaked men. Their screams lasted only a moment, and there was silence. The trees heaved a collective sigh and lowered the group back to the ground. They could sense Mylek's anger, and he could feel their apology. They had been caught off guard and reacted to save he and his group. He looked at the ground, took a deep breath, and then looked back up at the trees, forgiving and thanking them. The whole scene had made the group weary. It was there they made camp for the night. Sleep came easy. They would be in the forest for 3 more days, according to what Mylek could sense from the trees. That would go quickly. Being they were all on guard now, it should go safely as well. And that's the end of chapter 3.